I was 21 when this happened, back in 2017. At the time, I was working part-time at this little gas station a few towns over from where I lived. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. Just one of those jobs you take while trying to figure your life out. During the day, it was annoying but manageable. People buying cigarettes, energy drinks, lottery tickets, all the usual stuff. But the night shift, completely different vibe. At night, the place felt isolated. The fluorescent lights inside were way too bright, while outside was just darkness swallowing everything beyond the pumps. Every customer seemed weirder after midnight. That night, I was working alone closing the store. Around 9 or 10 p.m., the phone rang. I answered without thinking much about it. The second I picked up, I heard this low, dragged-out voice trying way too hard to sound creepy. Instantly reminded me of Ghostface from Scream. Like somebody doing a bad horror movie impression, the voice asked, "Are you all alone in the store?" I laughed a little and sarcastically said, "Yeah, you got me." Then I hung up. Honestly, I thought it was one of my friends messing with me. I even texted our group chat joking about it, asking which one of them was pretending to be a serial killer tonight. They all acted confused. One said he was home. Another claimed he hadn't called anybody. I figured they were lying to keep the joke alive. But then the phone rang again about 10 minutes later. Same voice. This time the caller asked why I hung up on him. I rolled my eyes and said, "All right, dude, joke's over." That's when the guy let out this weird laugh. Not playful, not drunk. Just calm. Way too calm. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten instantly. I shouldn't be rude to people who know where I am. I hung up immediately. At first, I still tried convincing myself it was a prank. Customers were coming in enough to distract me. People buying beer, snacks, gas, whatever. But every time the store got quiet again, I caught myself staring at the phone waiting for it to ring. And around 10:40 p.m., it did again. The second I answered, that same voice came through the receiver. Only this time, it sounded even calmer. The caller asked, "Does the store always get this quiet this late?" That got under my skin immediately, because he was right. The place had gone dead silent. No customers, no cars at the pumps. Just the hum of the coolers and the buzzing fluorescent lights overhead. For a second, I honestly didn't know what to say, so I just hung up again. But now the fear was starting to settle in. Not full panic yet. More like this heavy feeling in my chest telling me something wasn't right. I grabbed my phone and started texting my friends again, this time seriously. I wasn't joking anymore. I asked all of them one by one if they were messing with me. Every single one denied it. One sent me a picture from his basement. Another was supposedly at his girlfriend's house almost 30 minutes away. One of my buddies even called me directly and sounded genuinely confused when I explained what was happening. He told me, "Dude, lock the doors early if you have to." I laughed it off while talking to him, but honestly, that suggestion stuck in my head. Around 11 p.m., the calls started happening closer together. I stopped answering after the fifth one. The phone would ring. Stop, then ring again a minute later, over and over. I started obsessively checking the security cameras. The gas station sat alone off this mostly dead road, with woods behind one side of the building and a dumpster alley near the back. The outside cameras sucked at night too. Grainy footage, blind spots everywhere. Still, I kept flipping through them expecting to spot one of my idiot friends hiding outside laughing. But I didn't see anyone. That's when I started hearing things. At first it was small, a faint tapping sound somewhere outside. Then what sounded like scraping near the sidewall, then footsteps crunching on gravel near the back of the building. I froze every single time. I kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was an animal. Maybe the wind. Maybe my imagination was getting carried away. But deep down, my gut already knew better. I texted the group chat again and snapped a picture of the empty store. "This seriously isn't funny anymore," I wrote. Nobody confessed. And honestly, that's when I started realizing this might not be a prank at all. Around 11:40 p.m., the front door suddenly opened. The sound made me jump so hard my heart practically launched into my throat. I looked up expecting another random customer grabbing beer before closing. But the second I saw the guy, something felt off. At first glance, he looked completely normal, maybe late 20s or early 30s. Clean clothes. Nothing dirty or obviously creepy about him, just some average-looking dude, but his expression, totally blank. No smile, no nod, no, hey, nothing. He just walked into the store and slowly drifted through the aisles. I tried pretending not to watch him, but I absolutely was. Every few seconds, I'd glance at the security monitor behind the counter. The guy kept wandering around without grabbing anything. One aisle. Then another, stopping randomly. Standing still for way too long. A couple times I saw the top half of his face peeking over the shelves while he stared toward the counter. Not casually either. It felt calculated, like he was checking whether I was still there. I kept trying to explain it away in my head. Maybe he was high. Maybe exhausted. Maybe just indecisive. But my stomach had this awful heavy feeling by then. Like my body already knew this guy was dangerous before my brain fully caught up. He stayed in the store nearly 10 minutes before finally walking to the counter holding one small bag of chips. Still didn't say a word, neither did I. I scanned the chips and looked down at the register for maybe 1 second. Then I looked back up and caught him staring directly into my eyes. Not blinking, not smiling, just staring. The eye contact lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it felt way longer than that. There was something completely emotionless about it that made my skin crawl. Then he looked away casually and paid. I handed him the bag. He turned and started walking toward the exit. And for one brief moment, I actually thought maybe I'd built the whole thing up in my head. Maybe he really was just some weird guy. But right as he pushed the door halfway open, he stopped. Slowly turned his head back toward me without turning the rest of his body. His chin tilted slightly downward while his eyes looked up at me. Then he smiled. I swear to God, it was one of the creepiest things I've ever seen in my life. Not because it looked crazy, because it looked intentional. Like he knew exactly how unsettling he appeared and enjoyed it. Every hair on my body stood up instantly. Then he stepped outside, but instead of heading toward a car or the gas pumps, he walked around the side of the building toward the woods. And the entire time he kept his eyes locked on me through the glass, still smiling. I rushed over to the security monitor and followed him on camera. I watched him disappear into the blind spot behind the building near the woods. Then, nothing. 10 seconds passed. 20. A full minute. He never came back out. That's when I finally realized I needed to lock the doors early. The second that guy disappeared behind the building, I locked the front doors. I didn't even care that it was still a little before midnight. At that point, my instincts were screaming at me to get the hell out of there. I started rushing through the closing routine as fast as possible. Normally I'd sweep, wipe everything down, restock a few things. Not that night. Forget all that, I barely cleaned anything. I just wanted out. The entire time I kept checking the security cameras expecting that guy to suddenly reappear. Every few seconds I'd look over my shoulder toward the windows. Nothing. Midnight finally hit, and I decided I wasn't spending another second inside that store. I grabbed my keys, unlocked the front door, and stepped outside. Man, the feeling of relocking that door behind me was terrifying. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the key in properly. The parking lot felt way too open, way too exposed. I started speed walking toward my car parked off to the side of the building. Then I heard it. Fast footsteps. Not full sprinting, almost worse. Like somebody speed walking hard across the pavement straight toward me. I spun around, and there he was. That guy, he came around the front corner of the building, moving directly toward me in my car fast. The second I saw him, pure adrenaline took over. I yanked my car door open so hard it slammed against the frame. I practically threw myself inside, locked the doors instantly, and jammed the key into the ignition. I was shaking so badly I almost flooded the engine trying to start it. The car finally turned over. I slammed it into reverse and peeled out of that parking lot like my life depended on it, because honestly it felt like it did. As I pulled away, I glanced once into the rearview mirror, and I saw him standing there under the gas station lights, watching me leave, not chasing me anymore. Just standing completely still. The whole drive home, I was panic texting everybody. Voice messages, regular texts, everything. I told you guys something was wrong. That dude was hiding outside. He came out of nowhere. The next morning, I told my boss everything that happened and said I wasn't working overnights anymore. And his response honestly pissed me off even more. He reviewed the footage and basically brushed the whole thing aside. Said the guy looked like a normal customer. Said maybe the phone calls made me paranoid. Maybe I connected things that weren't actually connected. That made me furious. Because he wasn't there. He didn't hear the calls. He didn't see that guy smiling at him through the glass before disappearing behind the building. And he definitely wasn't the one getting approached in a dark parking lot at midnight. I quit not long after that. Didn't even argue much. I just told him if he thought everything about that night was normal, then he could work the closing shift himself. Even now, years later, I still believe the caller and that guy were the same person. And honestly, I don't even want to know what would have happened if my car hadn't started immediately. My name's Cadence, and at the time this happened, I was working closing shifts at this small dive bar off the highway. Nothing fancy. Dim lighting, old neon beer signs, sticky floors, and a jukebox that basically played the same classic rock songs every single night. Most of our customers were regulars. Truckers passing through town. Lonely people looking for a drink after midnight. You get used to reading people pretty quickly when you bartend long enough. Especially working alone. Weekends were busy enough to keep my mind occupied, but weekday night shifts were different. Slow, quiet, almost too quiet sometimes. That's probably why I noticed him immediately. It was sometime after 1 a.m. on a Tuesday when the front door opened, and this man walked in. If I had to guess, he was maybe late 40s, but he didn't look rough like most late-night customers around there. He was incredibly clean-cut, perfect posture, expensive-looking black trench coat over a black turtleneck. The guy looked rich, not flashy rich either. The kind of rich where you instantly know somebody's got serious money without them trying to prove it. He slowly glanced around the bar before taking a seat near the center. When I walked over, he calmly ordered a top-shelf whiskey without even looking at the price. As I poured the drink, he smiled at me and asked if I liked working there. Pretty normal question. So I smiled back and said yeah. Made some joke about bartending paying the bills. And, honestly, he didn't give me creepy vibes at all. That's what makes this whole thing so unsettling looking back. He actually seemed charming. Relaxed. The kind of guy you'd trust almost immediately. We talked for a few minutes while the bar stayed mostly empty. Then, out of nowhere, he asked me something strange. Ever think about doing something bigger? I laughed awkwardly and asked what he meant. He shrugged slightly. Saw potential in you, I guess. The comment caught me off guard, but not enough to make me uncomfortable yet. Then after this weird pause, he casually asked what time I got off work. That question instantly changed the atmosphere for me. Up until then, I honestly thought he was just being friendly. I gave him one of those vague bartender answers, smiled politely, and started wiping down the counter to avoid continuing the conversation. But weirdly enough, he didn't push it. Didn't flirt harder, didn't ask for my number. He just smiled like he already knew something I didn't. Then he finished his drink, calmly placed a crisp $100 bill on the counter for the tab and tip, and walked out into the night without another word. And the entire rest of my shift, I couldn't stop thinking about him. About a week later, he came back, but this time he wasn't alone. The second they walked through the door together, my stomach tightened a little, though I couldn't explain why yet. The woman with him looked maybe mid-30s, dressed trendy, but in this oddly calculated way, like somebody trying just a little too hard to seem younger and approachable. Everything about her felt rehearsed. The smile, the posture, even the way she leaned against the bar like we were already friends. Before I could even ask what they wanted to drink, she smiled brightly and said, "You are so pretty." Then her fingers lightly brushed my arm. Just a little too long. I laughed awkwardly and thanked her, but internally I was already uncomfortable. Something about her energy felt fake. The man sat quietly beside her this time, barely speaking at all, which honestly made things worse because during his first visit he had been incredibly talkative. Now he mostly just watched. Meanwhile, the woman kept asking me questions. How old was I? How long had I worked there? Did I like bartending? Did I ever want something more exciting? The questions came one after another wrapped inside fake friendliness. At first, I answered politely out of habit, but eventually I realized this wasn't normal small talk. She was studying me. At one point, she glanced toward the man beside her, and they exchanged this weird silent look, like they were communicating without words. Then she leaned closer and lowered her voice. "I run an exclusive event company," she said quietly. The way she said it instantly made alarm bells start going off in my head. She claimed she organized private luxury parties and was always looking for young, fun girls to work them. Then she casually dropped the number, 10 grand for a weekend. I almost laughed, not because it sounded funny, because it sounded ridiculous. Way too good to be true. I told her exactly that, but her smile never moved. She kept repeating the same words over and over. Exclusive, safe, easy money, fun. Every sentence felt polished, like she'd practiced this speech 100 times before. Then came the moment that truly scared me. She leaned in closer and said, "You should step outside for a second. Someone can explain it better." Instantly, every survival instinct in my body lit up. No hesitation, no fake smile anymore. "I'm good," I said firmly. For the first time that night, her expression shifted slightly, just for a second. Then suddenly the front door opened and a loud group of customers came stumbling into the bar, laughing and yelling. The change in her reaction was immediate. The friendliness vanished. She looked at the man beside her, and without another word, both of them stood up and walked out. That's when I realized something important. Those people weren't flirting with me, they were trying to get me outside. After they left, I just stood there behind the bar trying to process what had happened. The more I replayed the conversation in my head, the worse it felt. Nothing about those people seemed normal anymore. I told my coworkers and my boss everything before my next shift. The weird questions, the private party offer, the way they kept trying to get me outside. My boss took it seriously immediately. He told me if anything weird happened again, he was only about 15 minutes away. That honestly made me feel a little better. Still, there wasn't much anybody could actually do. Technically, those people hadn't committed a crime, so life went on. At least for a little while. A few nights later, I finished another slow shift and stepped outside toward my car. That's when I noticed it. A black car parked across the street. Engine off. No headlights. Just sitting there. The second I saw it, this awful feeling crawled up my spine. You know that feeling when your instincts recognize danger before your brain fully catches up? I kept telling myself not to panic. Maybe somebody was waiting for food nearby. Maybe somebody was on their phone. Maybe I was being paranoid. But I still gripped my keys between my fingers like a weapon while walking to my car. The second I pulled out of the parking lot, the car pulled out too. My heart dropped immediately. At first, it stayed several car lengths behind me, far enough that somebody else might not notice anything suspicious. But every turn I made, it made too. Right turn, still there. Another turn onto a side street, still there. At that point, pure panic started building in my chest. I knew it was them. I could feel it. I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands actually hurt. Then survival instinct kicked in. Without hesitating, I drove straight toward the nearest police station. The second I turned into the parking lot, the black car sped away instantly. Didn't pause, didn't circle back, just disappeared into the night. I sat there in my car shaking for several minutes before finally calming down enough to drive home. And honestly, that should have been enough warning for me, because deep down, I knew it wasn't over yet. And unfortunately, I was right. A few nights later, I was working another slow weekday shift alone. Barely any customers. By midnight, I was already thinking about closing early. That's when the front door creaked open, and my stomach instantly dropped. It was her, the woman. Same perfect smile, same calm expression, like nothing had ever happened. The second I saw her, I secretly grabbed my phone under the counter and texted my boss. "She's here." Then I looked back up and tried to stay calm. She slowly walked over and sat at the bar with her hands folded neatly in front of her, like she had all the time in the world. "Thought I'd come check on you," she said sweetly. Every alarm bell in my head was screaming at that point. I told her we were about to close and she needed to leave. Instead of getting upset, she pouted slightly and asked for just one drink. An old-fashioned. I considered refusing completely, but part of me thought keeping her there might buy enough time for my boss to arrive. So I reluctantly turned around and started making the drink. That's when I heard it. The soft click of the front door shutting. I spun around instantly. She was gone. The stool was empty, and through the glass front entrance, I saw a black van idling outside. My blood ran cold. Without even thinking, I rushed forward and locked the front door. Then came another sound. Bang, metal rattling violently from the back entrance. Somebody was trying to get in. At that point, survival mode completely took over. I grabbed the heaviest thing near me, a metal cocktail shaker, and held it like a weapon while dialing 911 with my other hand. My mind was racing. Do I run? Do I hide? Do I fight? The banging at the back door kept getting louder. Then suddenly headlights swept across the parking lot. My boss. The second his truck pulled in, the banging stopped immediately. And a few seconds later, the black van peeled out of the parking lot with its tires screeching. I don't even remember dropping the shaker. I just remember running straight toward my boss, completely shaking. When the police arrived, we reviewed the security footage together. And honestly, what the cameras showed was even more horrifying than what I imagined. Right before the woman walked out, two masked people had been crouched outside near the front entrance waiting. Another person had been at the back door banging on it intentionally, trying to force me into panicking and running out the front directly toward them. It was planned perfectly. The police took the van's plate number from my boss, but it turned out to be fake. Unregistered, dead end. To this day, nobody knows who those people were or what exactly they wanted from me, but one thing still haunts me more than anything else. What would have happened if fear had made me run out that front door? A few months ago, I was working the night shift at this tiny gas station and convenience store off a quiet stretch of highway. And when I say quiet, I mean dead quiet. After midnight, the place basically turned into a ghost town. Most of my shift was spent restocking shelves, wiping counters, and waiting for the occasional trucker or exhausted traveler to stop by. By around 2:30 a.m. in the morning, even the truck traffic had mostly disappeared. I was bored out of my mind. At one point, I stepped outside for some air because the inside of the store felt weirdly stuffy. It was freezing cold out, the kind where your breath instantly fogs in front of your face. The whole parking lot looked eerie, just empty gas pumps, flickering neon lights, and this dark tree line stretching behind the station. There was also this faint haze in the air, almost like mist hanging over the pavement. Everything felt still, too still. I was about to head back inside when something moved in the corner of my eye. I turned immediately and saw a person standing behind one of the gas pumps. The sight startled me so badly because I had absolutely no idea where he came from. 1 second the lot looked empty. The next, there he was. He wore a dark red hoodie with the hood pulled up and both hands shoved into his pockets. No car nearby, no movement. Just standing there half turned toward the store like he'd been watching me. At first I thought maybe somebody had dropped him off or he was waiting for a ride. But then I noticed the way he moved. He kept slowly shifting in this strange circular pattern around the pump, almost restless, like he couldn't stand still. Something about it immediately made me uncomfortable. I headed back inside the store but kept glancing toward him through the glass windows. For several minutes, he stayed out there doing basically nothing. Then suddenly, he started walking toward the entrance, slow at first, then weirdly fast near the end, like he suddenly made up his mind. The second he stepped inside, the entire atmosphere changed. He walked directly toward the counter and stared at me for a moment without speaking. Then in this rushed, awkward voice, he said his car had broken down nearby and he needed help. But honestly, the second he started talking, I knew something was wrong. The guy kept talking, but the whole story felt completely rehearsed. He claimed his car had broken down just past the pumps near the highway entrance and said he only needed a little help getting it started again. The way he explained it was weird though, too fast. Too eager, like he was trying to rush me past thinking about it too hard. I offered to call a tow truck. Immediately, he shook his head. No, that's not necessary. Way too quickly. Then he asked if I had a flashlight so I could maybe come outside and help him look under the hood. That was the moment my instincts really started screaming at me. Something about the way he watched my reaction felt wrong. Like this wasn't actually about the car. Still, people who wander into gas stations at 2:30 a.m. in the morning are usually strange anyway. So part of me kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe he genuinely needed help. Maybe he was high. Maybe he was just socially awkward. So I asked where exactly his car was parked. And that's when he pointed toward the security monitor behind me. I turned to look. And to my surprise, there actually was a car sitting near the highway entrance. For one split second, I felt stupid for doubting him. Then another thought hit me immediately after. I had literally been standing outside less than 5 minutes earlier. That car was not there. I stared harder at the monitor. That's when I noticed movement near the back bumper. Very slight, like somebody crouching low, trying not to be seen. The second I realized that, a cold wave of fear slammed into me. There was another person out there. Maybe more than one. And suddenly the entire situation made horrifying sense. The broken down car story. Trying to get me outside. The rushed behavior. It was a setup. But I couldn't let him realize I knew that. So somehow I forced myself to smile casually. Yeah, sure, I said. Let me grab my phone from the back first. The guy stared at me for half a second, then nodded slowly. I turned around and walked toward the back office as calmly as possible. But the second I got behind the counter out of his direct sight, I slammed my hand down on the emergency panic button, and instantly, the alarm exploded through the store. The alarm blasted through the store so loudly it made me jump even though I was the one who triggered it. For a split second, I expected chaos. I expected the guy to panic, maybe rush me, maybe start yelling. But what happened instead honestly scared me even more. The second the alarm started screaming, he relaxed. Completely. The nervous energy vanished instantly. No more rush talking, no more fake desperation. His shoulders loosened, and then slowly, he smiled, not embarrassed, not scared. A calm, knowing smile. Like the whole thing amused him. That smile genuinely froze me in place for a second because it felt like I was suddenly seeing the real version of him. The act was over, and somehow that was worse. Then, without saying another word, he turned and sprinted toward the exit. I rushed to the security monitors behind the counter just in time to see what was happening outside. Another figure suddenly emerged near the parked car. The person I had seen crouching behind the bumper. Both of them immediately took off running, not toward the highway, not toward another vehicle, straight into the woods behind the gas station. Within seconds, they disappeared into the darkness. But the weirdest part, the car stayed behind. Engine off, lights off, just abandoned there near the entrance. I remember staring at the monitor completely stunned, trying to process what almost happened. Because deep down, I knew those guys never intended to rob the store. They wanted me outside, and I honestly don't know what would have happened if I walked out there alone with them. A few minutes later, police finally arrived after the alarm triggered dispatch. I explained everything while still trying to calm down. Then one of the officers noticed something strange about the abandoned car. The front passenger door was slightly open. At first, that didn't seem important. Then it hit us. There may have been a third person inside the entire time, just sitting there unseen while the other two distracted me. And somehow, that realization scared me more than everything else combined. The police searched the area around the gas station for over an hour, flashlights through the woods, checking the highway, looking for footprints, anything. But those men were just gone. No trace of them anywhere. Meanwhile, that abandoned car sat near the highway entrance like some kind of unanswered question. One of the officers finally had it towed while another took my statement inside the store. I remember replaying the whole thing over and over in my head while answering questions. What if I hadn't noticed the movement near the bumper? What if I'd actually gone outside with a flashlight? The more I thought about it, the worse it got. A few days later, the police followed up with me about the car. Turns out it had been reported stolen over 100 miles away almost a week earlier. Nobody connected to it could be identified. No fingerprints useful enough to track, no missing persons reports tied to it. Nothing. Just a stolen vehicle abandoned outside a random gas station in the middle of nowhere. And honestly, that somehow made the whole thing even creepier, because if robbery wasn't the goal, then what exactly were they planning? That question still messes with me. The surveillance footage didn't help much either. Hoodies, dark clothes, faces barely visible. The police basically hit a dead end immediately. And after a while, the whole thing just faded into another unsolved incident report somewhere. But not for me. For me, it changed everything. Before that night, I used to think people exaggerated how dangerous overnight jobs could get. Now, I get it. When you're working alone at 2 or 3 in the morning, isolated off some empty highway, you realize how vulnerable you really are. There's nobody around, nobody coming to help quickly, and sometimes the only thing standing between you and something terrible is one tiny gut feeling telling you not to trust somebody. I quit not long after that, and I can say with absolute certainty, I will never work another night shift again. A couple weeks ago, I was working another overnight shift at Walmart. Honestly, the job itself wasn't terrible. Just repetitive. After enough night shifts, it starts feeling like time doesn't even move properly anymore. Same bright fluorescent lights. Same shelves. Same dull humming sounds echoing through the store at 2 in the morning. I mostly worked in electronics, which was one of the quieter areas overnight. Nobody's exactly rushing into Walmart at 2 a.m. desperate for Bluetooth speakers and phone chargers. Most customers were either bored night owls wandering around or truckers stopping in before getting back on the road. That's why I noticed him pretty quickly. At first, I didn't think much about it. Just some random guy wandering the aisles. But after a while, I realized something weird. He wasn't shopping at all. Every time I looked up, he was nearby again, standing near the clearance racks, hovering at the end of the aisle, appearing one section over from wherever I moved, and the entire time, he never picked anything up, never checked prices, never used a cart. He just stood there watching me. I kept trying to convince myself I was overthinking it. Walmart's huge, people wander around all the time. But something deep in my gut kept telling me this was different. The way he moved felt intentional. Like he wanted me to notice him. At one point, I grabbed my radio to call somebody over just in case, but that's when I realized the batteries had apparently died. Perfect timing. I remember debating whether I should go find a manager when suddenly a hand grabbed my arm. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Before I could react, this cheerful woman's voice rang out loudly beside me. "There you are." I turned completely confused and saw a woman smiling at me like we were old friends. I had never seen her before in my life. But she kept talking casually, acting like we knew each other. Then, without changing her smile, she leaned closer and whispered quietly, "That guy's been recording you. Follow me." The second she said that, my stomach dropped. I glanced past her shoulder. The man was still standing there. Only now, he wasn't even pretending to browse anymore. He was staring directly at me. And suddenly, fear hit me all at once. At that moment, I didn't question her at all. Honestly, I felt relieved. Terrified, sure, but relieved that somebody else had noticed the guy and stepped in to help me. The woman kept hold of my arm while talking loudly, like we were catching up after years apart. She rambled about random stuff nonstop. Some story about a trip, an inside joke that obviously never happened. Completely fake conversation. But the way she did it felt convincing enough that anybody watching would have assumed we knew each other, including that man. She quickly guided me away from electronics and deeper through the store. I barely processed where we were walking because my mind stayed stuck on one thing. Had that guy actually been recording me? The thought made my skin crawl. After a minute or two, I finally worked up the courage to glance behind us. The man wasn't there anymore. Instantly, I felt this huge wave of relief. I figured the situation was over now, so I told the woman we should probably go find my manager or security. But instead of stopping, she tightened her grip on my arm. "He's still around," she whispered quickly. Then she kept walking. Something about that immediately felt off. I laughed nervously and told her I was fine now, especially since we were still inside a store full of employees and cameras, but she ignored me completely. "Come on," she said. "Just a little further." At that point, her grip actually started hurting. I tried slowing down slightly, but she kept pulling me forward like she was in a hurry to get somewhere specific. That's when I finally started paying attention to where we were going, and what I noticed made my stomach sink. We had already passed the busiest areas of the store, past self-checkout, past the registers, past the sections where employees usually worked overnight. The aisles around us were getting emptier and darker. Ahead of us was the warehouse area and one of the side exits employees used for shipments. An exit with almost no foot traffic, almost no cameras. That's when the fear completely changed, because suddenly I wasn't scared of the man anymore. I was scared of her. The second that realization hit me, adrenaline completely took over. I stopped walking immediately and tried pulling my arm free. "You can let go now," I told her firmly. But she didn't. Instead, she smiled at me again, and this time the smile looked completely wrong. Not friendly, not comforting, calculated. "Come on," she said softly. "Just a little further." Then she tugged harder. At that point, genuine panic exploded in my chest. I looked around quickly. The area we'd reached was practically deserted. The bright front-end energy of Walmart was gone back there. No customers, no employees. Just tall storage shelves, dim lighting, and the side exit doors ahead. And the closer we got to those doors, the more terrified I became. That's when it finally clicked in my head. She wasn't helping me escape that guy. She was leading me to him. Everything suddenly made horrifying sense. The fake friendliness, the loud acting, keeping me calm. Separating me from everyone else in the store, I yanked my arm back harder and planted my feet. "I'm serious," I said. "Let go." For the first time, her expression cracked slightly. Not anger exactly, more like frustration that I was making things difficult. Then she tried pulling me again. That was it. I screamed, as loud as I possibly could. The sound echoed through the back area of the store instantly. At the same time, I ripped my arm free with everything I had and stumbled backward. The woman immediately reached toward me again, but I turned and ran before she could grab me. I sprinted toward the front of the store, completely panicking. And behind me, I heard her yelling. At first, she shouted for me to come back. But then, she screamed something that chilled me to my core. My name, she yelled my actual name. A name I never gave her. And somehow that scared me even more than the attempted abduction itself. I didn't stop running until I saw one of my coworkers rushing toward me from the front of the store. The second I reached him, I was basically hysterical. I grabbed onto him and yelled for security to be called immediately. By the time store security started searching the area, both the woman and the man were already gone, completely vanished. I remember shaking so badly I could barely explain what happened. At first, some people thought maybe I had simply panicked over a creepy customer. But then security reviewed the surveillance footage. And the second they saw it, everything changed. The cameras clearly showed the man and woman entering the store together. Every second of it had been planned from the start. The man followed me around electronics intentionally while the woman waited for the perfect moment to approach me pretending to help. It was coordinated, calculated, a setup. The footage also showed something else horrifying. The man's face appeared clearly in several camera angles, but the woman, never once. Every single time she passed a camera, her face was turned away just enough to avoid being identified. Almost like she already understood exactly where the cameras were positioned. Police got involved pretty quickly after that. Once they reviewed everything, they officially classified the incident as a failed abduction attempt. And honestly, hearing those words out loud made the whole thing feel even more terrifying. Because that meant my instincts had been right. If I hadn't screamed, if I'd let her lead me out that side exit, there's no telling what would have happened to me. But the thing that still haunts me the most isn't the man watching me. It isn't even the woman grabbing my arm. It's the fact that she knew my name. I never wore a visible name tag during overnight shifts. I never introduced myself, which means those people didn't randomly choose me that night. They already knew exactly who I was, and that thought still terrifies me every time I walk into work.